Today we're going to talk about some bike designs, some designs that are currently existing, some trends that we're seeing, and some trends we think were going to happen in 2026. And what better way to do it as a walk and talk through our new building, which we've got a right mixture of some of our demo bikes in here, bikes that have been dropped off by customers, and also a little progress update. We're still building this out, as you can see. The walls are still bare. This is very much going to be our demo centre. You guys will have to come here, borrow a bike, take it for a ride, enjoy what's going to become the Wilier Cafe. This will be a beer fridge fairly soon, somewhere you can just come and meet your mates, etc. Can't wait. We've still got a fair bit of building work to do. We've still got things marked out on the floor here where we're going to be setting up counters and all sorts, so loads to do. Anyway, what I want to talk about are some things that you should be looking out for when you're looking at buying a new bike this season, because there's some really good stuff on the market, but there's also some things out there which are still carrying some hangover features which you should probably try and avoid if you can. First off, something that I'm really keen to explore is the idea that we start talking about bikes in terms of their fit characteristics separately to their handling characteristics. This whole thing about endurance bikes and aero bikes just seems completely crazy to me, because so you should be able to have a bike which is still designed for long distance and endurance, which can still be aerodynamically efficient. At the same time, you should still be able to have an aerodynamic bike which can actually be quite upright and comfortable. Looking at that Morpheus bike that you might have seen all over Instagram, those lines are being somewhat blurred, and I think somehow we need like a cross shape rather than just a linear thing of just describing bikes from comfort all the way to aero. Got a little bit more nuance than that, and introducing the handling characteristics is somewhat more important these days. So the FiftyOne Sika is a great example of what we're seeing trend-wise in 2026. This is actually still relatively what we'd call race geometry. The angles still give you sharp handling, but we've got slightly more stack and slightly shorter reach, which you'd normally associate with an endurance bike, and yet we have aero handlebars and incredibly lightweight frames. So how would you categorize this? This is a bike that's just fantastic for taking out around your local roads and having an absolute blast, you know, a fast and furious ride for 2 or 3 hours, and yet at the same time it can still carry you on a really long 300k Mallorca 312 type ride. But again, it's probably not so suited to what we know as an endurance bike, such as something like this, which is the Look 765, and this would have a very long wheelbase, a slack head angle, which means that the trail measurement is quite long, and the actual reach is actually reasonably long on this as well. Great for those really long flat roads, just getting the miles done. In fact, this one just recently done a trip from Athens back to Kendal, all the mud guards hanging bags off it, perfect for that sort of adventure. There are other similar designs out there like this now, so the BMC Road Machine quite famously, the Cannondale Synapse, all of those blaring the boundaries between those two bikes I just showed you. It's an interesting time for this comfort endurance area of bikes at the moment, and it's way more nuanced than it used to be, where it was just lots of vibration control widgets and short and high. And on the race bike side of things, we're going to see significant changes this year. We had two things that are really going to trigger that. One, the UCI regulations have changed somewhat, which means that we're now seeing weird and wacky designs like the FiftyOne and those Cervelos that we've seen hitting the headlines with some bonkers aero figures. I mean, of course they're going to be more aerodynamic because the regulations have changed, the design parameters have been opened up. When this bike was launched, it was on the era of the same specialized SL8 where we wanted one bike for aero and lightweight. And now it looks like the Pro Peloton is going back towards purely aero and some really wacky designs like that Colnago, like the FiftyOne. So I wouldn't be surprised if we're seeing bikes that were originally designed for a hybrid lightweight aero suddenly be replaced with pure aerodynamic designs, which are now coming in at weights which still get you very close to the UCI weight limit. It's going to be an interesting couple of years, I think, for, you know, the pro bike development. As much as we're going to see some pretty wacky designs, I think we're going to see some fairly conservative designs as well. Compared to what we're seeing, Wilier, I think, were actually pretty conservative where their design here. It actually performed reasonably well in the Cycling News Aero test, probably better than most of us expected. But there are some design points which I think we should be aware of when we're looking at these new bikes. One is this UDH, and I know that I bang on about it, but you can see what's happening here. When you are making a race bike for a skinny, fit pro racer who wants a narrow Q factor for their hips, You're compromised then by having this UDH and the 142mm axles, because you end up with problems with hitting your heel back here. Great for all road, great for when you want 40mm wide tyres, but when you're trying to run 28mm, keep everything nice and narrow, the UDH doesn't really work, except for we are now seeing the trend of going shorter and shorter cranks. So conspiracy theory for you, is our drive towards shorter cranks also a part of stopping this heel problem? I don't know, 160mm seems okay, 165 seems to be optimal for quite a lot of people. SRAM have just announced that they're now going even shorter than that. Time will tell whether that trend gets picked up, but definitely there's a point where shorter cranks also help you with the UDH problem. And just to be clear, I am not anti-UDH. I think it is absolutely brilliant. The fact that you can have a bike like this with 40mm wide tyres and an absolutely bomb-proof mech, something that is just totally reliable, that you can just take out your garage, take it out for a thrash no matter what the weather, no matter what the road conditions. This bike is so much fun to ride, and that's because it has very traditional road bike geometry. The handling is correct. It hasn't gone to the long slack handling of endurance bike. It keeps everything nice and tight, but you do get the benefit from the wider tyres. And with this gearing, it just makes it a grab and go bike. I've really enjoyed riding this. I think we're going to see more bikes of this ilk this year, I really do. I also think this is the year where we start seeing bottom brackets really start to change, because we need to, if we want to have wider tyres and we want to have more aerodynamic frames, then BB86 and BSA probably isn't the way forward. A great example of this is the new Colnagos, the Y1 RS and the V5 RS, which feature BSA bottom brackets. And then actually a brand that we really like, Baconi, who is the Team UAE sponsor, were then tasked to try and make a BSA bottom bracket aerodynamic, because you suddenly had this big chunk of aluminium sticking out the side. If the drive really is for aerodynamics and for lightweight, then BSA and doesn't make any sense in that situation. They could have easily just made the frame a little bit wider and therefore stiffer, made it lighter, got rid of all the extra aluminium and just had a nice press fit design. And now that SRAM are really a big major player now, and their SRAM dub crankset is so predominant, you know, we really should be thinking about bigger bore bottom brackets, which is where BB386 Evo and T47 really should be the predominant standard right now. I think we should try and put the days of BB86 and BSA behind us and concentrate on the future a little bit more. Talking of which, I really think it's about time that the industry tries to somewhat standardise some headsets. It might not ever happen exactly, but we're getting pretty close now. Right now, there seem to be like 3 headset sort of dimensions. We have our 56mm, which seems pretty common, but possibly a little bit too big for those Aero designs, and the Aero designs are really now focusing on like a 52mm design. But we do seem to have settled on an internal bore of our bearings. So this is your 51.9 52mm, and this is your slightly smaller one that we're starting to see on more and more Aero designs that work with that 52. My big thing with this, I'm all up for having a standardized headset and these all working. What we have done now is integrated this problem where this little chamfer here is now causing us problems. And although we can get things to fit, so we can replace this with something like this, it looks scrappy. And the 52mm diameter is making that even harder. Let me show you. If this sort of geeky stuff about headset dimensions is right up your street and you're a professional bike mechanic, head over to Skool.com and search for Mapdec. We are in the early stages of launching our, well, it's an online school essentially, particularly designed at CPD for professional mechanics and really high-level home mechanics. We've already got our first few members in there helping to shape that community, give us some guidance on the modules that are already existing. We've got massive plans. Head over there. At the moment, there's a special offer on for the first 50 people to join up. You are going to be the ones that help us build out that community, build out that content before we launch on a much bigger scale. I'm really excited about it. It feels like Skool.com is the platform that I've been waiting for to launch this. Really is all about CPD, mechanics helping mechanics in a much more structured and professional way. Head over, there's already some industry professionals in there. We've got some guest speakers lined up, ready to launch. Yeah, Go and take a look, tell me what you think. So for instance, this is the Look blade example, keeping the head tube nice and narrow on a 52mm, but because of this tiny little chamfer back here, it makes it very difficult to swap out your stem. They do actually make an adapter now, but it still limits you with your choice. And if I show you the Wilier solution, remember they have their own super skinny bearing, but they actually keep the internal diameter the same. So still have a 52mm top cap, but on their Aero designs, again, a completely different cutout here, making it very difficult to swap out for a different handlebar if you didn't like that shape. Whereas on the older model, they had a very flat design. So this, you probably could switch out this 52mm top cap relatively easy and switch to a bar that you prefer. And I think that's the problem now with the Aero bikes. You are gradually narrowing down your choice of handlebar, and that's a real shame because there's some really good third-party brands out there making some excellent bars, but we seem to be stuck in the ecosystem that our bike brands are pushing us to. Talking of which, while we're over here, with our drive towards shorter cranks, we also need to be pushing our bike brands to be supplying a zero offset seat post. For years and years and years now, every single bike has come with a 2cm offset. Now we're going shorter, we really need to start thinking about bringing that forward. Whoa, 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 what did he just say? As you shorten your cranks, you have to bring your saddle forward. No, that's not what I said. But what we are finding is that as you shorten your cranks, how much you compensate with your saddle isn't exactly a 1-to-1 ratio. And we're definitely finding that we are fitting more and more zero layback seat posts more than ever. We're going to pick up all those questions when we interview Phil Burt on a real deep dive into crank length. Subscribe for that. Well done for Wilier to making this come with a zero layback as standard. Look, one of our brands now does a zero layback for the blade, but lots and lots of brands are still a long way behind, and you end up buying another 250, 300 pound seat post. Pretty sure we can do better. Another trend that we saw this year when we went down to the Wilier show was the trend for wider and wider tyres, but also wireless shifting now looks to become predominant. We are desperately waiting for what Shimano are going to do on their road range. But when that happens, I think this is going to open up this entire area here for new development, and actually the seat post area, because one, you don't have to worry about where you're going to put that Di2 battery, and you don't have to worry about running cables through your chainstay. Once we take away those two things, I think we are going to see some very tall and narrow chainstays like we saw from Reap Components. We're going to see some very, very narrow seat posts because now you don't have to put the battery down there. I think once Shimano drop that new group set, if it is 100% wireless like we suspect it's going to be, we're going to start seeing some very weird and wacky designs. And not just in road bikes. Remember, you now have wireless dropper posts as well for mountain biking. And once that becomes really synonymous, you can probably put your pivots and your shock almost anywhere. Now you're not constrained by having to run a cable to the dropper post or even the rear mech. I think we're going to start seeing some really funky designs come out soon. Now, while I've got this in my hand, let's take the opportunity of, are there any bikes that we are particularly looking forward to this year? Well, we've done really well with the FiftyOne Sika. It's suiting an awful lot of people, but we've definitely had a few of you asking for a slightly more racier version of it. And I think that Aidan probably has something like that up his sleeve. I wouldn't be surprised if we see another road bike launch from FiftyOne. I'd also love to see a gravel bike. Their Assassin is fantastic, but as loads of you pointed out to me, 45mm tyre clearance just isn't cutting it in 2026 for gravel bikes. We need 50mm plus. Although that is brilliant for touring, do you agree? It does need that wider tyre clearance. So I think we're going to see some cool stuff from FiftyOne this year. What about Look? Well, I think Look are definitely changing how they distribute their products. They've now got their configurator on their website. They're going to be really focusing down on bringing out special edition paint and some really cool models like that, and trying to get more frame sets out in the market, which I'm a massive fan of. I don't think the right way to buy a bike these days is by buying it fully built. You group sets now coming down and down in price, and there is so much wheel choice that really we just want our traditional frame manufacturers to make really good quality frame sets and get them shipped where you can build the rest of it in their dealer network. So the Look 785 is finally going to be back in stock somewhere around the springtime. Now, their gravel bike, the 765 gravel, desperately needs upgrading, and I think this is the year that we're going to see one of that definitely needs to catch up, well, with the rest of the world. So I'm definitely eagerly awaiting that from Look. Don't think we're going to see a new blade this year. I think it's still new in the market, but I think with the new UCI regulations, that's probably got to be on the drawing board. From time, you might remember that interview that we had with Dieter. They are definitely launching 2 new models, trying to clear out the very last of that ADH and ADHX stock. There's hardly anything left now. We're actually starting to ship some of the stock in America back to Europe because the demand in Europe is much higher in the States. So we're looking forward to, I think, we're probably going to see a new endurance bike. Whether that gets called fluidity or not, I don't know, but they must be bringing out a proper endurance long wheelbase bike. I really hope they are. Finally, from Wilier, we've actually seen quite a lot from them. We've seen the new Rave SLR, that's fantastic. Hopefully a review coming on the channel pretty soon. We've seen the new Falante, loving that. We've got the new Verticale coming onto the channel pretty soon. We've got a super lightweight build inspired by all of your comments, which I think you're gonna love. So it must be time probably for a new Gran Turismo, which is their endurance bike, and I'm really up for that. The Gran Turismo was actually quite an aerodynamic design, but still had lots of elastomers in it. I'd love to see them simplify that. There we go. There is my unpopular opinions all wrapped up into one video. Please fire up the comments. What bikes are you really looking forward to seeing launched this year? Anything from our range, anything from another range, anything that we're really missing, or is the industry overlooking something? Get down there and tell me all about it.